Welcome to The Driven Entrepreneur, where we sit down with visionaries, trailblazers, and entrepreneurs and discover why and how they do what they do. We'll get the backstory, plus plenty of life and business lessons along the way. Here's your host, Matt Brauning.
Hey, this episode is brought to you by my very own NLP practitioner course. I've been teaching neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, for nearly 15 years. It is the most powerful tool for communication on the planet, and it can be yours today. For a very limited time, I'm giving away my entire NLP course workbook for free. Go to nlpwithmatt.com. All the patterns, all the tools, and the techniques of NLP in the complete course workbook, the same one that we use to teach our live certification classes, yours free. nlpwithmatt.com. Get it today. Let's get back to the show.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to The Driven Entrepreneur. It's Matt Brauning, and I am here another beautiful day. Well, it all depends on where you're listening from, but I know we can find beauty in everything. And that's why you're such a darn visionary. That's why we do this show just for you. And today I have something I'm really, really excited about, of course. I know I say I'm excited every week, but this time, when I have a guest that really speaks to my heart, that really impacts my life, this is what this week is about. And I have someone really, really cool, none other than Josh Landan. And Josh, well, he started actually telling his career story from behind the lens, filming, directing, writing, producing films and documentaries all around some of the world's top surfers, snowboarders, and skateboarders. So I know we're going to get into that. He's had a ton of phenomenal athletic friends. And eventually he created Saint Archer Brewing Company and later became Harland Brewing Co. So I want to talk all about the brew world. And somewhere in there, we're going to get into the world of what is taking the world by storm, in my opinion, hard seltzer. You've probably heard of some of those. And well, Ashland Hard Seltzer is a phenomenal new brand coming out. And I am sitting here talking to the founder. So without any further ado, Josh, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, I am so excited. We had a little technical difficulties we started, but you are here and we are in studio and we're ready to go.
We did it.
So, dude, first question. I mean, like, I thought we were going to have this whole conversation about, the alcohol industry and like how to, because I have a lot of questions about how to get into that. But you started filming, and did you kind of get pulled into, the skateboarding, surfing kind of scene first and then started filming stuff? Or are you one of those filmmaker creative types that happen to have a hobby? Tell me how this kind of comes together early on in life.
Yeah. So I grew up in Ventura, California, which is about 30 minutes south of Santa Barbara, here in Southern California. And, kind of growing up at the beach and picking up surfing in high school. And I think you quickly, if you fall in love with surfing, it's very quickly to find out that you're probably not going to be a professional, right? And it's going to be like a hobby for you for hopefully the rest of your life. And, for me, I think it was kind of this is the mid to late 90s. So it was really the heyday of the surf film, and what Taylor Steele was creating in Solana Beach down here in San Diego. And I started watching his movies and really just fell in love with them and wanted to, make surf films like he did. And it just so happened in Ventura and, Santa Barbara counties, you have some of the best surfers in surfing's history that have come out of that region. And so I bought a video camera and started filming surfing and started filming those guys up there. And a lot of the guys that were in Taylor's movies were living in Ventura, and I could film them. And, I just kept at it, and they introduced me to Taylor Steele, and I started filming for him and traveling around the world for him. And then I made my first film when I was 20, and then kind of 10 films later, did pretty well.
It's incredible. What was the networking like? I'm just trying to imagine you kind of, young guy on the beach. I want to start filming stuff. And then you see probably in your eyes, right? These celebrity surfers these guys are the ones I watch in the movies, and they're just out surfing. Did you just like get shots of them, or do you go up and say, hey, excuse me, Mr. So-and-so?
Both. Yeah, all of the above, knocking on their door cold.
Really?
And, and asking them where they're going to surf that day. And I'm young at this point, right? I'm 18. And these guys, you're a 25-year-old professional surfer. And, back then you could only see these guys in the magazines or on video, right? It's not like you see what they eat for breakfast every day on Instagram like people do now.
Sure. Well, you could, because you're looking through their windows,
Right. But they're like heroes because you don't know what they do all day, right?
Right.
So when you actually see them, they're larger than life, like how athletes used to be back then. Now, not so much, right?
Sure, yeah. So you just start taking off, man. And so you're filming, and are you doing where's your heart in this? Are you into production? Are you into the capture, like the film side?
Yeah, really the storytelling side of it.
Storytelling.
Which is why I made documentaries. I really enjoy like the personal stories. The two films I made in the middle there, Flow, which was the history of modern surfing through Al Merrick and Kelly Slater and Tom Curran. And that won a lot of film festivals. And then the next film after that, I made a film on this woman, Tara Dakitis, who was a professional snowboarder in the early 2000s. And, I think, and that did really well in film festivals too. And really was the reason why I was able to start making music videos and doing all those types of things.
So can you talk to me a little bit about, Josh, the forte into other avenues? I think there's a lot of conversation about like today's entrepreneur is either you have your hands in every cookie jar and you're like, oh, I do all these things. And that's like cool. But then there's the other conversation about very much finding your lane, picking a niche and being really clear that this is what you do. Are you wanting greener pastures? Are you wanting to expand out of creativity and wanting to, try your hand at something else? Or in your mind, is this just, hey, I'm doing the same work, but now I'm going to go into some other industries outside of surfing or athletics? When you get into music, can you tell me kind of how that transition happens and what you're thinking about?
Yeah, it was really just, it's really just in the film, really the transition came from when I went from films to owning a business, right? Even though films are really entrepreneurial, right? You're doing all the production, you're getting the financing, you're dealing with the distribution, and even though it was
HR.
you're kind of doing it all, right? Like it's a very entrepreneurial experience. So I think really the big jump was going from making movies to having the idea for Saint Archer, and then and that's I wasn't a brewer and I didn't know anybody in the beer business at all. Like I didn't know anything about anything really, but I had the idea to do a craft beer when I was on a surf trip in Puerto Rico, and a tequila business approached some of my friends that were on tour if they wanted to invest in the company and be a brand ambassador. And they asked me what I thought, and I said, well, I'm not sure if I really see tequila, but if you don't want to do the energy drinks or sodas like what sponsor most surfers and skaters, why don't you do a beer? Everybody drinks beer for the most part. And if you could do a craft beer, that'd be even better because you actually drink it,
Right.
And,
it's cooler. So to you, what's the difference between like, and I know there's a huge difference, but what do you think between the craft beer and like the Bud Light or what have you, as far as that conversation you're having?
Yeah.
Or the ambassador side of things?
Yeah, I think I think being with Bud Light, there's not, it's just a different kind of relationship, right? Where craft beer is more handcrafted and artisanal, and there's generally a story told behind like a small brewery. The guy that I'm talking about, Taylor Knox, is from Carlsbad. So if you could find a brewery to align yourself with here in San Diego, that would be ideal, right? It's a great story. Bud Light is, Budweiser, in my opinion, they're the king of beers. So like, there's not a lot of bad things you can say about
in their opinion too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they are, you can't knock the biggest beer brand in the world. Right. But, I think for the guys, it just made a lot of sense. And I just said, well, instead of trying to find you one, why don't I just create one? I was like, build a brewery. Like, how hard could it be?
And how old are you at this point, Josh?
I'm, let's see, about 32.
Oh, okay. So you got that kind of adult head on your shoulders now. You've been through a lot of business. You've seen the success. You've seen, I'm assuming in the film industry, it didn't always work out too. You've seen both sides.
Yeah. I'd never been through this kind of business, right? Like I didn't even know what a capital raise was, and to know I needed to go raise $3 million and have no idea how to do that. I would say that nothing that I learned as a filmmaker carried into any aspect of, now this entrepreneurial life that I've carved out for myself here over the last 9 years or so. So it's been a completely different thing. I mean, when I'm 32, my daughter was 3.5 and my oldest son was 6 months old. And my wife and I, we've been together since high school. We were living in Ventura, and I just came home and told her we're moving to San Diego and we're going to do Saint Archer. And
can we briefly ask, how did that conversation go?
Yeah, it went really well. I'm one of the few blessed husbands / entrepreneurs, I think, where I have a wife who has always believed in me through and through, right? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs' dreams, or even business owners, not just entrepreneurs, right? And anybody who has something else that they want to do, in a lot of ways, as you kind of get older, the dream kind of starts and stops with their spouse, right? Male or female, whoever it is. And I think a lot of women in that situation with 2 little kids, and all of our friends and family in Ventura would have said, "You're out of your mind. You're not quitting films and like, we do well. Like we have a good living here. We pay the bills, and we can do everything we want to do. And you want to leave all that and move to San Diego and do a craft brewery, and you're not even a brewer, and I don't get it." Right. But she didn't say any of that. She said, "I'll find us a place to live." And
wow,
move to San Diego. Yeah.
No, that's true, man. That's incredible. You're speaking of the faith she has in you and your vision, and your vision as a husband and father. That's so, I don't know if the word is underrated, but I think
big time.
Yeah.
Big time.
Everyone has a different relationship, obviously. And, my wife and I, we approach business together differently, but very similar in that way, where if I go to her and say, "Hey, I have this idea, I think maybe this could be cool," she's going to ask a lot of questions. But if I go to my wife and say, "Honey, I've been praying, or I've been sitting with this, and I feel like this is the right thing to do, or this is something I have this vision," I bring that vision for her. She's like, "Where do we sign? Let's move forward." That's awesome, man.
Yeah, I think it was a huge deal. It was really like the first hurdle without knowing it was the first hurdle.
Well, you didn't have a hurdle. It sounds like it was on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, but I mean, I think she could have just said, "Hey, no, I don't feel comfortable with it," and it probably would have stopped right there, but moved to San Diego and somehow raised $3 million to build a 17,000 square foot brewery just east of La Jolla here in San Diego.
And that's not, I mean, so if you're just east of La Jolla, it's still a pretty nice area down there. So it's not cheap real estate.
No, I mean, it's industrial and a lot of breweries. San Diego's the craft beer capital of the United States, in my opinion.
Hey, my opinion too. It's definitely up there.
It's the best. So I think, that was the other thing. Like, it would have been easier to just put this brewery in Ventura. There is no craft breweries in Ventura at the time. There were not. Now there are. But
so you had the potential, like in Ventura, you maybe could have been harder, but it also could have been easier because you'd be the attraction, right? You'd be the only brewery to come and visit and be in town. But you picked San Diego, and I want to talk about that. Getting started with it. And I guess here's my question about moving into this. I've talked to a couple of different people. Shockingly, I have no ties to this industry, like you didn't before. But some people go, "Man, I really want to have this craft brew, or make a brewery," and they kind of decide maybe we're going to align with something current. You're going to go down that white labeling type of deal where you have your label, but with a
Yeah.
manufacturer.
Contract brewing. Yep.
Contract brewing. There we go.
Yep.
You decide, I don't want that. I want my own brick and mortar. I want my own thing. What is it about it? Is it the control? Is it the vision? Is it exciting? Like, why would you go down that road of let's do all of it ourselves?
Yeah. I think well, first and foremost, here in San Diego, contract brewery brands do not work.
They don't work.
No, it's not something that is a viable option if you want people to actually be drinking and buying your beer. So for me, building a brewery is the only option. Like I said, if I would have done it in Ventura, probably would have gotten, we would have been the only game in town, but I never wanted to be a big fish in a small pond. I wanted to be a big fish in a big pond.
I love that.
So I think I thrive in kind of the pressure situations, especially where there's a lot on the line, in this case, millions of dollars on the line. And I knew that if I came to San Diego and built a brewery, it would either be I'm out of business in 6 months or we're doing it. And it's a successful business, and we're on our way, and that's exactly what happened. I mean,
so there's only two options, really, of course, as you're saying. And I want to briefly just kind of ask you. I don't need all the nuts and bolts necessarily, whatever you want to share. But you're talking about a $3 million capital raise, and couple questions just in the details for a moment, if I can. Number one, what kind of business do you feel like should not consider a capital raise versus why did you think we must have this? Just because of the build out, or are there other business factors that led you into understanding this is the business plan? I think it sounds sexy sometimes to people. I should raise capital. We can make this thing. But the reality is maybe they should lead with profits and build it slowly. Obviously you have a ton of equipment, but can you just talk about some of the factors that led to needing that amount and starting with a capital raise for a plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, it's really hard to raise capital, right?
Sure.
It's hard to raise millions of dollars for your vision, right? Like that's just, come to find out, not easy.
One thing to get your wife on board, another thing to get $3 million on board.
Yeah. I mean, I've raised 45 million now over the last 7 years.
Holy moly.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think for people, it depends on the business. For us, there was no choice, right? The equipment and the brewery and the construction and all of the things all of the personnel that's needed to really launch a successful brewery, it's going to cost millions, right? There's I shouldn't say not in every instance, but we were building out a production brewery. We launched with 6-packs and 22-ounce bottles and draft, and you don't have to start like that, right? Like you can, borrow a couple $100,000 or $100,000 from, friends and family and try and do a small little tasting room out of a storage unit. People do that stuff. For me, I wanted to do something way bigger from day one. And, I had a lot of the athletes, skateboarders and surfers invest in the business. But I didn't even know what a capital raise was, like I said. And looking back, really, I had no business raising $3 million, not being a brewer and not really have any friends in the beer business, or definitely no experience in the beer business. So, and then to launch it and really be the fastest growing craft beer in the United States over the next 2 years was a lot, and wound up raising 10 million ultimately over those 2 years just to keep up.
Wow. And how many rounds just for the first 3? Was that like 2 rounds?
We did 3 rounds in our first 2 years before I sold the business to Coors.
Gotcha. Oh my gosh. All right. We haven't even gotten to that part. This is getting good.
Yeah.
I knew some of the history in my research, but I did not know all of that. With the first brewery, and of course, I want to get to Ashland, the current business you're doing now, Hard Seltzer business. You have a ton of co-owners, and you've done really well to bring in athletes, musicians, celebrities. And again, I love your model of not just, hey, be an ambassador, but be an investor, be an owner with us. Let's do this together. That's very cool. Did you start that idea with the brewery initially?
Yeah.
And maybe even before, would you have some of the athletes be producers in your surf films as well?
No, they were just friends of mine that I, met along the way. And some of them were in my films. Some of them weren't. Paul Rodriguez and Mikey Taylor and Eric Costin and all of those pro skaters. I never made films with them. They were just friends of mine. Um, but I think it was definitely in the alcohol world. It was definitely an unusual business model to have athletes as investors in promoting the brand. And but coming from skateboarding and surfing, it was pretty common. So really, it was that's what I grew up in, and that's what we know. And really, the Saint Archer was built like it could be a skate brand or a surf brand. We just happened to produce craft beer instead of clothes or shoes or sunglasses or whatever, right? So it was really modeled and kind of conceived through skateboarding, and then it just happened to be a craft beer.
Gotcha. I love that.
Yeah.
And then did you on the craft beer side, is that when you got the idea, or when did you get the idea to start kind of combining the idea of investor, co-owner, and ambassador all into one?
Yeah, I mean, right away for me, there was a surf brand in the mid '90s called On a Mission that all my favorite surfers owned. Taylor Knox and the Malloy brothers and Shane Dorian and Rob Machado and Taylor Steele, all these guys,
Okay.
Ross Williams, they all owned this accessory surf brand. And what they made is irrelevant, but the impact of them owning a business and me feeling like if I buy an On a Mission t-shirt, I'm supporting Ross Williams was like the best thing in the world.
Right.
Me.
Like a made by surfers for surfers.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's
with
kind
us.
Yeah, it's kind of like, on a much different, larger scales, but it's kind of like Michael Jordan and like his Jordan brand. In the beginning, you that was like your only connection to him, right? You'd wear Air Jordans because you love Michael Jordan. Like that was your only way to show it. And you felt like Michael owned it, right? It was like his deal. Even though it was all Nike, right? But
right. Well, I kind of feel too, like on the Air Jordan side or whatever the brand is, there's also that element of, hey, I feel like no matter how much he was into it, I feel like he was designing it. I feel like my basketball player, I play basketball, so he's got input, and it's not just some up in the corporate tower, right?
Yeah, it's his, and then you feel like I'm like in a very small way. At the same time supporting Michael Jordan and showing everybody that I'm a Michael Jordan fan, right? So like, there was a lot to that, and it just made a huge impression on me. Same with girl skateboards around the same time, when Rick and Mike left Plan B and started Girl with Spike Jones, and that was a huge deal, like they had all the best guys and they owned it, and it was the coolest brand. And so it was really taking all those little elements from skateboarding and surfing and just kind of putting them into craft beer, which was at the time very unorthodox, right? Like it just wasn't an industry that had seen something like what we've seen for years in those two industries.
Sure, because you're having you're having like Monster or Red Bull and that kind of thing, and like you talked about,
Rockstar,
Rockstar, and certainly not craft beer.
No, and the guys just like, they drink, well, they're sponsored by those beverages, but you're a world-class athlete. You're probably not sucking back a Monster, right? And
it's a culture, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice that they, make people think that, but in a lot of these guys, cans is water, Yeah. They're not really drinking a Red Bull.
And let's move on, because I want to get to Ashland and the idea of a hard seltzer and kind of the timeline for that too. But before I do, last quick question on the craft brewery. Did you start, or at least early on, with the idea of exiting and making a sale? Or is this something that you got approached and you went, holy crap, I didn't expect this, but why not? Let's move on. You said you sold Coors. How does this happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you take millions of dollars of people's money, you got to have some sort of an answer for how they're going to get it back,
right? And
not only get it back, but make a return on their investment, right? So it was definitely always there. I knew I needed to get their money back, but I had needed $10 million more just to keep going, and at that same time, we had companies put offers in on the business, and one thing led to another, and we sold it to Coors about 2.5 years in.
About 2.5 years in.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you did okay for yourself?
Yeah, I did good. Yeah, I did good.
Good.
I think for me, it's never been about the money. And I think a lot of people say that. It sounds nice to say that, right? Because you don't want to sound like this, materialistic kind of jerk. But for me, it's all about the competition for me. It being an entrepreneur is, in a lot of ways, a very stressful life, right? It's not, people read the magazines and it sounds nice to say that you're an entrepreneur, but when you're, as competitively driven as I am, it's all consuming, it's an all consuming thing, which is probably why I've started 5 businesses in the last 3 years since I left Saint Archer. Yeah, and I think, the motivating factor for me has never been money. It's still not, and never will be. But, starting Ashland, I think, it was the same kind of thing as Saint Archer. It's what my friends and family are drinking. And, I saw a massive hole in the segment where there's no brands. White Claw and Truly are not necessarily, brands. They're kind of made by the masses, and there was no independent hard seltzer that was like telling a story.
There's no craft brew in the seltzer space.
Right.
How long into, because like I'm a consumer like a lot of other people, right? So I walk into the store and I go, oh, there's this new thing, hard seltzer. That's interesting. And I know it's kind of been around, right? But not really. No one's drinking it. And now all of a sudden, hey, 100 calories, et cetera, et cetera. Let's go get this instead of these heavy IPAs that I started getting into for a while.
Definitely.
So talk to me a little bit about the time frame of, and I'm sure you're going to be a lot clearer than I would be. So when would you say that hard seltzer really kind of hit the market as a concept? And then when did Ashland come in? Was it before or after the Bud Lights and Coronas? Can it walk me through a little bit of that backstory of the industry itself, if you can? Yeah,
hard seltzer. I mean, really, White Claw Truly have been around for the last 2-3 years, right? But I think it really caught fire last summer.
Yeah.
Last summer is when you started to really see White Claw, really White Claw, right? Like White Claw is the really the phenomenon. And it just took off. And I think, they had out of stock issues and they had all these things. And I think that really opened the door for Truly. But we, so I had the idea for Ashland in July of last year. And from idea to market was 5 months, which is really fast.
Yeah. I mean, that's fast for anything. You can't have a baby in 5 months.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was fast. And I think because I saw, a lot of craft breweries are doing seltzers, but there needed to be like a standalone, Ashland isn't a craft beer doing a seltzer. All we do is seltzer, and I think that's what the category was lacking was, as with light beer in the 70s and then into the early 80s, it needed like a craft version, which was then, Sierra Nevada and Boston Beer and a few others, right?
And that's what first kind of broke the mold from the Miller Lights, and the Budweisers and Coors.
So it's really like Ashland kind of, going in a different direction as like an artisanal craft version of a hard seltzer. We taste different than they do. Those are malt-based beverages, and ours is the alcohol comes from fermented sugar. So it really tastes like a Pellegrino with 5% alcohol.
And that's another thing that I would say, not just on the hard side, but on the virgin side of seltzers. Those of also the bubblies and
that's huge,
right? They've taken off. Like my fridge used to have various different sodas and things, and now
of course,
it's all packed full of bubblies and all that.
Yeah. It really took soda out, right? As where I think hard seltzer is taking out craft beer specifically.
It's incredible. And the only difference, see, my fridge, if I can be so bold, still has some IPA. It has some different craft beers. I like local, right? Because that's the thing. But it's also full of different seltzers. Hopefully Ashland very soon. I'm looking.
Yeah, that would be nice. Yeah, we can. Well, you're talking to the right guy.
Hey, do you have a hookup?
I do. Maybe able to wrangle a couple cases.
Oh, that'll be incredible. I just gotta come down to San Diego to Cardiff by the Sea and grab some. I want to make sure we have a little time to plug this too, not just talk about the story. So of course we're going to plug and story, but like I'm looking, at at what you have available. And a couple of things, of course, stick out is number one, organic. Number two, gluten-free. And I'm sure are there brands that have gluten, or like depending on how they brew it? Is that how special?
I think they pretty much all are.
Right.
I think they're all, I think, I know Truly and like they're all gluten-free.
Gotcha. But you have a difference. Where did this idea, alkaline water? If I go down to my local Whole Foods or Mother's Market, there's alkaline waters everywhere and the pH, and that's become a pretty big health phenomenon. Is that one of those gaps you're talking about where you go, I don't really see a quote healthy version, or I don't see the crunchy hippie wants the alkaline. I'm not talking down to that, but you know what I'm saying? Like where did the idea of alkaline come?
Yeah. I mean, we just wanted the cleanest beverage we could have, really, the alkaline water is like what we're brewing with. So it was kind of an easy, when the pH is over 7, it's alkaline, right? So we're naturally brewing with that anyways. And I thought, wow, that's pretty awesome. I didn't even realize that.
So you were already doing that just because it creates a superior product.
Yeah, because it's just it's a better tasting product.
Who came up with the idea? And sorry to interrupt. You came up with the idea. We should market the thing we're already doing.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, why aren't we telling anybody this? So that was exciting. But I just wanted, like I said, I wanted a seltzer water that wasn't really flavored. I didn't want the aftertaste like I've gotten on so many of the other brands. And, ours is just yeast, water, 5% alcohol, and an organic essence. That's it. And there's nothing else in it. It's
easy.
And I think that's why people have gravitated towards it. And they're kind of dangerous. You can drink 3 or 4 of them and you don't even realize what's going on until you stand up and go, whoa, good afternoon.
Yeah, not like with the heavy IPAs. We have a bourbon barrel-aged stout. And you're like, whoa.
Yeah, those are just, and I think, I'm 41 and I have 3 kids and I like to surf and all those things. Like the beers are just not in the cards for me anymore. Maybe I'll have one, but like if I'm like drinking and we're at a barbecue or doing whatever, like, everybody's drinking hard seltzer. Nobody's drinking 6 beers anymore. Like those days are long gone.
No, well, look, and going back to your wife and my wife being supportive, I'm 40 years old and if I can't have an IPA belly, at 45, right? And I'm going to have that.
No, and you just don't, like I had a couple beers the other night and you just don't feel as good.
Right.
It's just like you feel it's funny. Like when I knew that the health thing, like the better for you health lifestyle really finally found its way to alcohol basically. Right. And I think hard seltzer is the 4th category, right? It's going to be spirits, wine, beer, and hard seltzer in America.
I'd agree with that. What are your top selling flavors? Because you have some interesting ones. I want to try blackberry lemonade. Looks really
That's our number one.
I knew it.
Number one. Yeah. That's number one. They all do well. And since it's really a variety pack driven category, you never know. I see all the flavors on Instagram. But it's funny going back to the, Cody Bellinger, who's now a World Series champion as of last night, from the Dodgers. When he came on board, to be a part of this with me, I was asking him why he drinks hard seltzer. Right. And here's the 23-year-old MVP of baseball saying, I just don't like feeling bloated. Well, when I was 23, I didn't even know what bloated meant. Right? Like I'm like, bloated, what does that mean? Do you have a balloon? I don't get it. But nowadays that's the difference between today's world and maybe what was around 15, 20 years ago was, people in their early 20s, they're health conscious. They're eating organic food and they're careful about what they put in their body, whether it's Cody Bellinger and Jared Goff or just the average guy walking down the street who's going to the gym a couple times a week, right? Like, Jared, quarterback of the Rams, he's saying the same thing we are, man.
Yeah, I don't want to be bloated. I want to feel good. I don't want to. Also, that kind of like I don't drink enough to ever be hungover, but there's still that feeling of when you drink something like an IPA or even wine, it's like you still have
the sugar.
It's the sugars, right? And
it's the
dehydration.
Exactly. The sugar is what gives you the hangover, right? So like with Ashland, there's no sugar in it. There's nothing in it. So I think people really like that too. And it's all ages and all, it's not like a young person's drink. I mean, we see people buying and on Instagram from 21 to 65, male, female, rich, poor, black, white, doesn't matter. Everybody's drinking it.
Everyone's into Ashland. Well, hey guys, you can follow and find out who's drinking Ashland Hard Seltzer at Ashland Hard Seltzer on Instagram.
That's pretty easy.
Yeah. And then you can follow Josh Landan. That's Landan, Josh Landan _. Make sure you hit the underscore because that is the real Josh Landan. Josh Landan _ on Instagram, and find out all he is up to. Josh, man, thank you for coming on the show and spending the time with us. And your story, it was just really fun to get to know you. I hope we get a chance to do this again. Please let me know when the next flavors launch. I'll have you back on. We'll talk about a little more of your story. It will be a blast.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks, Josh.
Alrighty.
All right, y'all. That is the Driven Entrepreneur this week. Hey, listen, check out Ashland Seltzer, man. They are San Diego, Southern California local. So if you're in the SoCal region, you can certainly get that. I know, of course, you're listening to this show from all over the place. So keep an eye out at Instagram on ashlandseltzer.com and at Ashland Seltzer, and you'll find out everything you need to know. Sorry, Ashland Hard Seltzer on Instagram, and you'll find out when they're coming to your town as well. So thanks again to my guest, Josh. What a lovely man, and great to get to know you, buddy. Hey, get out there, stay driven, and stay awake, stay alert. Drink responsibly, of course, if you're going to at all. And if you are going to drink, enjoy hard seltzer responsibly and social distance. All right, bye.